everyone. We are missing you at Sydney Inner West. Welcome to Friday Findings. One of the most annoying things to hear, but one that we often enjoy saying is, "I told you so." We have more than likely had a time in our life when someone has said to you, "If only you had just listened to me in the first place, you wouldn't be in this mess now." I told you so, but did you listen? Often as parents, we advise our children against doing certain things because from experience, we have learnt the hard way. And we want our children to have it easier than us. But do our children always listen? No. Being obedient has to be right up there at the top 10 list of things that is hard to do. It seems to get a negative rap all the time. But obedience is also part of our faith journey. It's doing what Jesus teaches. It's a positive, not a negative. When we love someone, we follow them, we believe in them. We like to do things for them. And when the people followed Jesus, when they began to believe in Jesus, they started to live their lives around his teachings. They began to treat people differently. They treated people better. They loved their enemies. They fed the poor. They clothed the sick. They helped the needy. They touched the diseased. And they loved the unloved. This was completely new to their culture. They believed in Jesus and what Jesus was teaching them. And they reorganized their entire lives to live by his teachings. Jesus has just given, in my opinion, one of his most famous speeches, the Sermon on the Mount. Now, the Sermon on the Mount is about altering your entire lifestyle, a new way of living. Jesus was giving new teaching to look at your living and the way that you do things and to see how they compare to the teachings of Jesus. I want you to read Matthew chapters 5, 6 and 7. Then Jesus gives us this great parable, a story in Matthew chapter 7 verse 24. He says, "Therefore everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock." He goes on to say that when the storm hit, the rain, the winds and the waters rose and they beat against the house, it did not come crashing down because its foundation was on the rock. Why did Jesus add this parable after his teaching? He is saying to us, I'm equating everything I just told you about life and relationships, about money, about love, about enemies and forgiveness with good old-fashioned common sense building. People hearing this would have gone, "Oh yeah, I get it. It's not rocket science. You have to build your house on a strong foundation." And just as the house with good solid foundation can withstand the storm, so your life can withstand the storms of life if you have a proper foundation. At the moment, we are practicing what the government is asking us. We are observing the restrictions placed on us. We are staying home to save lives. We know that in being obedient in that, we are keeping not only ourselves safe, but others safe as well. We are seeing the benefit of being obedient. Jesus is saying, if you hear my words and practice them, then in the storms of life you may get a bit battered, but at the end of the storm you will be standing because in your life you practiced what I taught. Now the flip side of this, of course, is everyone who does not put into practice the teachings of Jesus is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the floods came up. It's interesting that Jesus uses the exact same storm to hit the foolish man's house and yet we have a different consequence. The house comes crashing down that was built on poor foundations. Now, for some of us, this parable can bring comfort because many of you have recognized the teachings of Jesus. You've embraced them. You've reorganized your lives to live by the teachings of Jesus, to practice what Jesus has taught. And I'm sure that if I were to ask, many of you would say that you have been hit by storms, but you've come through. For some of you, this parable is a warning. Now is the time to start preparing, to regroup, to rethink and to reevaluate your foundations. And if you do this, then the promise of Jesus is simple. When the storms come, you will remain standing. I love how Matthew 7 ends with verses 28 and 29. Jesus finished teaching, and the crowds were amazed because he taught as one with authority. And from that crowd, a group of people began to embrace his teachings. They reorganized their lives around his teachings, and it transformed them. It transformed their communities, and it transformed the world. And today, many years later, and right around the other side of the country and the world, lives are still being transformed by people who have embraced the teachings of Jesus. It's transformed my life, and it can transform yours too. So what does your foundations look like? We have very quickly had to adjust and embrace and change our lives in these strange days of the COVID-19 pandemic. It has been hard and there has been loss. But the world has turned upside down and changed in ways that we would never have thought possible. People have been so generous with their time and talents. Families are eating together, playing together, out walking together. There has been a huge shift in how we live our lives. We have seen so much creativity and innovation, all because we have been obedient to what, in the past, we may have thought impossible. How much more could we experience if we reorganized our lives and embraced the teachings of Jesus? God bless you.